Khair, I'll invite Dr. Zishan. You want things?
I think I can. Maybe I can just.
Okay, it's up to you.
Can you hear me? Great. So I'll speak slow. No resonance.
Stick to 5 minutes.
Yeah. First of all, thank you to be here, and I'm really delighted that you guys are here. The whole purpose of this to engage the community, because there is no action or initiative can be started without the engagement of the community. And a person who has a physician background with a public health lens, I'm here just to look at the different perspective. When I look at the public health, when I look at the community, when I look at the climate change, I look at what is the problem, what is the cause of that problem, and who is going to impact by that problem. So if you look at only these three major things or three pieces of that puzzle, like we are the community, focusing like mostly, which I would say living in the US, we have mostly Muslim community that we are talking here. And then what is basically is the cause. Here is the climate change, which is a buzzword for the last 5-10 years. We have seen a lot of those things, a lot of initiatives started. And how it is impacting us, we need to connect the dots, and how we can do it because of the public health. Public health talks about the social determinants of health, which is about housing, which is about food, which is about transportation, which is about the diseases, that the prevalence of the diseases in the community. How many of you think that the climate change is a public health crisis? That's great. That's great. I'm really glad that there is so much awareness in the community. And just look with that lens. Like when we look at the vulnerable population, the elderly population who are on the fixed income, who are those who are less privileged in our community, how we collectively come together as a community to help them when there is a heat wave, putting them at the higher risk for dehydration, for a stroke. How many of you guys have the privilege to live in a bigger homes, but those who live in a smaller homes where don't have a good air quality in their own home? How many have you measured the air quality in your own homes? How many have you analyzed, like when you are sleeping or you have a sleep apnea caused by the air quality in your own home? Yes. So that's the whole thing. When I look at the public health lens, that's what I want to bring, education and awareness. How many have you thought about utilizing the resources the county provides you? How many of you know that in Hamilton County we have a lead program, lead initiative grant? Like if you are a pregnant woman, if you are a 6-year-old child, and if your home is invested with the lead, the government can get all taken care of without a penny you have to spend on it. Means those are the resources we are talking here when we talk about public health, when we talk about climate changes. And I serve on Montgomery City Environmental Advisory Commission Board. I serve on Greater Cincinnati Mental and Behavioral Health Board. So I try to connect those dots, like isn't it the climate change is a psychological toll at the people's mind, like those who cannot afford. And imagine like you have a tornado and it blew away the house roof, how much it will cost us, like all these things. And when we started this conversation to having a public health background, climate change, healthcare outcomes, because it's not preventing just to prevent the harms to the health. It is also how we can improve the health outcomes. So just think on those areas, like how we can come collectively together and how much we can prevent. Like if the kids are there is no heating, there is no cooling, how much mental stress they would have, anxiety, depression, PTSD. These are the things you can't imagine. And right even before the kids is born, when the mother is pregnant, these are the factors that influence the child and the mother. And when they grow up with the same stress, same anxiety, we are not able to diagnose them unless someone tell like their activities are going on. So I'm just here with all these my qualified panelists. My view is towards like more healthcare side, more towards the person who needed health, and how we can come together, how we can be the part of that change, and how we can get like more Just to become a doctor is good, just to become an engineer is good, but I would like to see more my community go in legislations. I want to go my kids to go see in policy making, because that's where you are going to make an impact, not for us today, but for our next generation tomorrow. And that's what we need to see all of you guys to get more engaged, because the policies change future for generations in this country. And let's come together to be the part of that change and be the part, like help each other. That's what Islam translates us as a community, to help each other when we have the needed most. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair, everyone. I think we have about 20 minutes left for question and answers. And I think we have quite a few questioners and also some of the engaging discussions we had.
You guys should have scheduled like a longer time period. You made them rush. There's mashallah. I didn't know what I was getting into when I came here. I want to thank you guys so much. Personally, I've been contemplating this for a couple of weeks. It felt like Allah sent you guys to answer my question. Sorry, you guys. But I actually want to stand up because I feel like it'll be better that way. I recently went to the MLK celebration in Cincinnati, and they had a lecturer from one of the universities here, and he was very engaging in political activism, right? But the whole time he was talking, I understood what he was saying. I could relate it to Islam, but he kept talking about the public aspect of it. So at the end of the session, I ran across to the backstage because I want to grab him. I want to talk to the professor. Like, how come you didn't mention personal change? Because you got them all motivated to, the government and this and that. But how many of them actually care about what's happening in their house? He said something, and then we were emailing. But I started thinking about this, and you guys all brought about a perspective that reminded me Islam is not just about looking at it from one perspective. What it does is we look at all aspects, but in the end, we all go towards contemplative, right? In the end, it starts from you. If you can change, then the world can change. Allah does not change He does not change the situation of ummah or people until they change, right? I guess I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say there's so much to it, and I appreciate so much, and I want to talk to you guys all so much and ask so many questions. I just want to say I really appreciate it, and I want to hear you guys talk more. Please schedule more events like this. Thank you.
Thank you for your feedback also. So, this is the first session, and inshallah, if you guys stays engaged, inshallah, we'll plan more. That's the hope. You had? I have a rant. Okay. Okay, let's ask questions.
I have a rant too.
Okay.
I'll start my rant.
Okay.
This topic makes me very depressed. For 20 or 30 years, I was recycling my trash. And then I realized this recycling program is actually a fake by the oil industry. So all that effort I was doing to take personal responsibility was garbage because it was just bringing the trash anyway. So then I go buy a Tesla to save on the gas, and Elon Musk is getting a huge pile on the national state. What am I supposed to do? And then you say Islam is the answer, but all Muslim countries are supplying all this oil. And if they can't recognize and see humanity as Palestinians dying, what is climate change that will build them? So this topic, I'm sorry, makes me very depressed. I wish there was an easy answer. I feel like there's this personal responsibility. You do a good job. You drive your electric car. You put your trash away. But these big corporations and institutions are just doing all this stuff, and it's like diverting responsibility. You don't do your part. So that's the problem. Don't look at us. You're not doing your part. And it makes me very depressed thinking about this. Thank you for the rant.
Okay. Does anybody want to respond to it?
Thank you for that. Can you hear? Thank you for that question and observation. Well, I would keep it short. I don't think any of us said that Islam is the solution, but I understand that's the sentiment that many Muslims sort of have. And yeah, that's not going to do us much. If it's, as I said, even when I was talking about having a contemplative life and think about something like ecological living in an age of climate change, I was talking about the challenges of consumerism, challenges of materialistic values. If we put in attaining wealth and technological advancement as our top priority, this does not relate to Elon Musk or anybody else on the individual level. Obviously, all of the teaching, no matter how sacred they're not going to work. But I totally agree with you when it comes to looking at the kind. It's more multidimensionally, like the economic aspects of it, political aspects. So I did mention like it's multidimensional. So I mean, Dr. Malik would have more to say about this. But for my part, I think that when it comes to, I have a degree in economics, so I actually think about it from an economic perspective as well. So if you think it's a problem, as I mentioned, a deeply entrenched interest in fossil fuel industries, but and then you're thinking about a solution. The solution would not be not consuming any of the products and the oil and everything that they supply to us. Obviously, not going to work. But there are alternative models. You can think about something like degrowth theories. So right now, to keep things short and simple, it's not, some technical knowledge is required, but we think that economic growth, to grow more and more, have more and more, consume more and more, is the solution. However, we don't realize its kind of negative impacts on the environments. So for developed countries especially, there are a lot of economists or a lot of philosophers who are now proposing something called degrowth theories. It's not like negative growth. It's like determining how much wealth is kind of enough, beyond which acquiring more wealth does not serve your purpose. So developed countries have reached, many of these have reached a point where gaining more wealth actually leading to all of these social problems in a way, like loneliness epidemic they were talking about. So there are a lot of studies talking about how more wealth is not the solution. And also, I completely agree with you when it comes to the Middle Eastern countries and their multi-billion-dollar projects, like Saudi Arabia has NEOM, $30 billion now, came down to, I think, few billions, thankfully. And then Dubai has all of these so-called sustainable, cities, Masdar and then Maktoum Solar. But then if you look at the overall carbon footprints of some of these countries, it's staggering. There is no comparison, even, so compare America, Dubai, and some random African country. You'd have no idea that the tremendous difference between carbon footprints. So if it's UAE, it's something like more than 100,000 terawatt hour, whereas the US is somewhere like 78 to 80,000 terawatt hour. Whereas an average African country, people who bear the brunt of this, you would not believe their carbon footprint. It's slightly less, it's even less than 10,000 at most. So that's the reality I think we're living in, and we have to be aware of the challenges. Yeah, but more can be said about degrowth and all of this. I just don't want to spend all of the time myself.
I saw so many hands, and I'd really love to hear from the audience. So I would love to hear more from you, Saif, but let's wait until everybody else has had something to say. And I also know we have some very esteemed members of the in the audience who are also very qualified on these areas. So can we make sure we get all the questions?
Yes, that's what. Who had a question here?
Maybe I tried not to speak through the mic because it's echoing. So first of all, I echo her comment on the need for such lectures. Thank you so much. Please continue doing this initiative. The other comment I have is that while our teachings in the Quran and Hadith have been really calling for preservation of the planet, preservation of plants, treating humans fairly, animals fairly, these haven't been really embraced by Muslims or adopted by Muslims. I think it's the least on their priority. Actually, like when you talk to Muslims about the need to really do better for the environment, you're often met with ridicule. You'll always hear this comment that you have on one of your slides, the American attitude. I argue that's not an American attitude. You will always hear this comment that Allah has made this earth for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sakhar hada al-kawn lana, so we can do whatever we can. So I think this is a great start. though the numbers aren't that huge, but hopefully, with this initiative, we continue to raise and be at the front line because it's in our teaching, and I feel that if it's not enforced, enforced is not the right word, but if it's not coming from Islamic institutions, it will be less adopted, because I feel like Muslims need to hear an ayah, a Quranic verse, or a hadith, so they start, I guess, implementing or embracing such thing. So I guess it hasn't been emphasized well enough in our Islamics, and that's why it's least adopted by Muslims. That was a comment. But yeah, I don't know if you have any, I guess, explanation for that attitudes among Muslims in general. And how can we do better?
Anyone wants to take it?
Can we go ahead and all the questions?
Yep. You had a question? Go ahead.
I guess it's more of a comment. When you think about the environment and the role of corporations and whatnot and government, it becomes overwhelming. Because, you went out and you bought your Tesla, but did you know that the people in Congo were digging up the cobalt with their hands, And I've heard all these horrific stories, and if you think about it like that, it becomes very overwhelming, where you just feel like, I'm just going to go in my bubble, I can't do anything about it. I am not going to be able to invoke change. But for me personally, I take it upon myself, I'm a recycler, and I still recycle despite the fact that, probably half. So in my mind, I'm doing this. In my mind, I want to go to, Whole Foods, and I sneak in my container that I get olives from. Instead of getting a new container every time, I just wash it and take in my olive, the same container all the time. With Ramadan coming up here at ICGC, it drives me insane. Water bottles, the styrofoam, the food waste, it just drives me insane. And I've wanted many times to just do something where, hey, have an ICGC container, a glass container, where everyone brings in their dish and they get their food that way. A filling station for water instead of all of these water bottles. So yeah, there is something that we can do, but if you think about it, it can be overwhelming, but for me, it's just I have to do something individually and try to, and give that information to my students and my children and my family.
Just because somebody else is not doing it or that it's not perfect doesn't absolve us from doing what we can. So, I think each one of us has to take personal responsibility. I do have a question. Everyone wants to talk, but I do have a question. And the question is what are the best practices, best models that each of you have seen in regards to whether it be places of worship, whether it be communities, whether it be cities, or whether it be businesses? Because I think what we need are best practices. We don't, we're trying to figure this out. So if we have models, it'll help us. And I do want to alleviate a little bit of stress. I talked to Brother Henry, or I saw something that says we're getting filling stations, and ICGC will be selling, ICGC water bottles so we can replenish without having the plastic, thousands and thousands of plastic, which also wastes a lot of water. So every little bit matters, but best practices, best examples, would be good.
I won't use the things. I don't think I need it. Okay. So, all right. Sorry, we decided to just talk, but we'll take more questions. Yeah. Very good. Okay, I'll try to be really quick, but I really do want to hear from this. So first of all, I strongly appreciate the comments, and especially say Dr. Jawed, or everybody's doctor here, who just who mentioned this thing about Tesla and the recycling, and you have to keep in mind that the logic of I'm sorry. I thought it was creating more trouble than it was worth. Oh, I didn't know that. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that. Okay. Yeah. So what I was going to say is that once you get a little more into the advocacy side of things, you see that it turns out that there are vested interests that have a huge amount of wealth at stake if there's a switch away from fossil fuels, for example, right? Just as there's electric car companies that have a lot at stake in promoting them, right? So, and they have a way of promoting certain kinds of behavior patterns that make it feel like, oh, what's your personal responsibility? And that's a way of really deflecting their responsibility. And so we have to be politically savvy about this, that yes, we need personal transformation, but we also need that collective one, and we also need to hold actors to account who are among the ones that are the worst offenders, right? And that takes organization. It's hard to do as individuals, right? In terms of the best practices, what we really need, and I'll just say that I've looked at a little bit of this at the university level, right? And what we have are different systems for reporting what different universities are doing in terms of sustainability efforts. So there's a reporting system, for example, that my university is a part of, and our university could frankly be doing much, much better. And I'm part of a group, the Climate Action Workshop there, that tries to write letters and appeal to administrators and talk to different people. But really, despite the fact that there's a very strong Catholic teaching, it's a Catholic university, it is very hard to actually generate the change that we need. But it's not that nothing is done, but the scale of changes that we would like to see are not yet happening. But it doesn't mean that there aren't others in our group of universities who aren't doing it. So Loyola University in Chicago has made quite a model set of changes. If you ever get the chance to visit them, I think they're a really spectacular example. If you look at in Jordan, they're increasing efforts to use solar power in mosques, for example. And you can go to Morocco. This is on a country level. Morocco has built this massive solar area, solar power generating. That potentially is a huge shift in the way energy is generated in the Middle East, right? And you can go further than that. Countries that you may not think of, Pakistan, for example, which I talked about, again, produces not much of the world's emissions, and it has a lot of fossil fuels. Pakistan has coal, it has a lot of gas, but solar power is skyrocketing in Pakistan. Why? Less because of environmentalism, because it's much more reliable than our horrific electric grid. So if you're a business person and you want your factory to be running or your agribusiness, you need that solar. Now, somebody mentioned about the conflict in the Middle East and its effects. I'll just say very briefly that military conflicts, wherever they are among the worst offenders in terms of damage, both in terms of emissions, but also in terms of toxins. It's horrific what happened. You can go from Iraq, you can go to almost any of these conflicts, and you'll see this. So I have not seen any kind of scholarly analysis of the footprint, but I would bet that it's been very, very severe and atrocious, not to mention the direct cost on so many people. So.
So I can add to the best practices. As we mentioned, as a Muslim, we have to be role model first. So I consider like my activities, currently I do all the recycling by myself. I arranged backyard composting at the city level, at the city of Montgomery. We bought a model plan where you have a big bucket, which comes with a smaller bucket you can put on the kitchen counter for the food waste, and can put that bucket for the composting in the backyard. So you don't need to bring your food and waste that. And that program I launched with the pilot resident for City of Montgomery, about 120. That went very successful. And one is currently placed in my backyard. And there is a small container in my kitchen at the countertop. That is one of the best practices that we can do. The other thing is that I don't know how many of you or this county has. We do have in Hamilton County a 15,000 grant that you as an organization wants to partner with them to be the main ideal location for composting. They will provide you, they will allocate the space, they will build it for you to do the composting, that you can utilize that one and provides all the flower beds we can do at the mosque level. So there are certain practices. Then other thing is that cardboard recycling itself, like if you do the cardboard recycling, you get paid from the county. So at the city level, we have that one. We make like thousands of dollars in city of Montgomery just cardboard recycling. So it's just one of those activities that shows us that it works. And I would not get disheartened if big corporations are not doing what we want them to do. There are a lot of things they are doing we don't like them to do. So I would do it as a human being, as a person, to do my best, and also align with the right mindset, people who align with your values, and to raise the voice at your city council. Like, hey, we need that initiative at the city level. So that's why you get your voice heard. And from the city level, you can take it up to your state level. And then if you live in an area where you have a direct access to your congressman, you can raise it to that one as well to get more funding.
Just a quick point. So let's be a bit self-critical. So if I may ask, is there any Muslim climate change organization in Cincinnati that you are aware of? I actually teach a number of many courses on climate change at University of Cincinnati, and I do sometimes which is something called public engagement assignment, as trying to find a lot of organizations here with which students can get involved. And to my surprise, I couldn't find any. I know QSC and another organization where some Muslims are part of, but are you aware of any Muslim organization here? So what does that tell us? Because in comparison, there are many other organizations, activist organizations, or different ways they're kind of fighting for climate change. So that tells us a lot, perhaps. And then also, is ICGC, would you consider ICGC a green mosque? I don't know. Is it run on solar panels, for example? Does it have good water conservation model? Or I don't know. There are maybe some steps that have been taken. Brother Iqbal was telling me there was a gardening event last year, planting trees. So that is good. But there are some green mosques that we can look up to, for example, and in the UK, in Cambridge, there is Cambridge Muslim College, which is a green mosque, and it has all of these energy-saving models. So yeah, I think at the individual level, at the communal level, and at the political level, there is a lot that we can do. So that's something that I had in mind. And also, another point the sister was mentioning, I think very good. So Ramadan is coming, or in general, why is it that there is lack of awareness? So something to do with, yes, the way we understand perhaps religion, the way we relate to the Quran. To me, it's quite surprising. If you read the Quran, and if we are paying attention to what it says, it's mind-boggling how many times you hear the word, earth, water, different natural, scenarios, or animals, and creation in general, and our responsibility, and our relationship with the creation. How can one not be eco-conscious? So there's a verse, I was just thinking today, it says, لَخَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ أَكْبَرُ مِنْ خَلْقِ النَّاسِ. The creation of the universe is much greater, more complex than the creation of human beings. And then the famous ayah, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ. We shall show them our signs, both on the horizon, meaning in the wider cosmos, in the wider universe, and also within themselves. So God's signs are everywhere. Why is it that it does not lead to kind of climate, environmental awareness, consciousness that people talk about? And by people, I mean secular people. Look how many books are there, how many talks the universities around the world organize about all of these topics. So to me, it's mind-boggling. So perhaps thinking of the Ramadan, the first thing we can do is to kind of read the Quran, because that is something we do, but trying to gain something called eco-consciousness in the process. And of course, there are a lot of other practical steps we can take when it comes to Ramadan. For example, off the top of my head, just when we open the tap, we can just open it to a slow trickle rather than kind of just fast, so that we conserve water. And there's so many other steps you can think to lessen your carbon footprint when it comes to Ramadan, other activities, and so forth. Thank you.
Ask the hard question from Dr. Anna.
Yeah.
I actually do kind of have a hard question. One of my biggest issues when it comes to climate change is overpopulation, because we hit our carrying capacity billions of people ago, and we haven't started to degrade at all. We just keep going up and up and up, and that's something that seems like no one wants to talk to when it's about climate change, because like you don't want to tell people to stop having kids, but also the world cannot fit this many people, and the more we use these resources, the less there's going to be. How would you, like any of you, like respond to how our carrying capacity has, we've gone over it like tenfold by now?
Carrying capacity and overpopulation.
I can have a brief comment. You want to go first?
Why don't you go ahead?
I can have a very brief comment. This is a very complex topic. There's something called Kaya identity. It's a mechanism developed by Japanese economists that is used by IPCC, the UN organization, to measure carbon footprint, carbon emissions of different countries. So it has different variables, and one of them is population growth. So even if you have technology, and just to give a simple example, if you have best technology and somehow you can manage food production at a much faster rate and do all sorts of things, still, if you're not able to control your population, then you're not going to have much effect. And so it's a very complex situation, because you can point to China, you can say they had a very drastic policy of limiting family to just one kid, one child, and it's still China's population today is over a billion. And the projected global population is going to be something like 11 billion in a few decades. So there are people like Donna Haraway, for example, a biologist and environmentalist. She says something about making kin, not babies, very provocatively. Thinking about, of course, it is something, it's a very personal decision. And so, from a religious perspective, for the survival of humanity, there are all sorts of, everything is at stake. However, her suggestion, again, it's merely a suggestion, I don't think it's going to work, is that we should think about multi-species being. We should think about forming bonds with everything else, because we are part of a greater whole. We are not just individuals, isolated islands. And so this should transcend biological relationships. So maybe one way to cope with this and the Anthropocene was her solution. However, it's a very complex issue.
Yeah, I think this is a huge issue. Many of the fastest growing areas in the world are in the Muslim world, right? And it's interesting because there's not the same prohibition on contraception in Islam as there is in, like the Orthodox, or I should say the standard Catholic teachings, for example. So, but having said that, there's all sorts of demographic reasons. The demographers, the standard predictions that I know are not just only increase, but that there is a leveling off and then eventually a decrease. But I remember I was at a conference in Jordan, and the crown prince at the time of Jordan was at the conference, and he just simply said, how do we deal with the fact that we have all these refugees, we have this growing population, and what is our carrying capacity? So it was exactly that problem. And we had this group of institutional political economists and water engineers and other people grappling with the question. So I think the multidimensional side is definitely big, but I also do think that the older demographic predictions of people like Paul Ehrlich, or before that Malthus, they have not really borne out the way they were predicted to. So things could, and especially probably the best known indicator for not going to extremes in population growth is women's education. It turns out that the more years of education women have, the lower their fertility, essentially. And so that makes so there is, and that is on the rise. So. But it's a very good question.
And I would just add one more thing. We need to have a sustainable agriculture which is resilient to the climate change, because that thing need to go with providing more resources where there are less resources. With the increasing populations, at least meet the needs of that one.
If you didn't come here to hear me speak, but I'm going to answer this question to my ability. I thought that some years ago, but what I come to realize is that is a narrative that I think that is a false narrative. From an Islamic perspective, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if I correct me if I'm wrong, but He said, if you have a child, don't worry, Allah will take care of the child. So you shouldn't not have children for fear of poverty. And if Allah is commanding that, then that means that don't worry about it, have your child. The other thing too is if you see all these people dying in famines, are they dying in famines because there are too many kids there, or because of the economics of starvation and not giving them resources they need? Right? You have multi-billionaire, almost trillionaires hoarding wealth and not spreading it around, and then they're blaming these people for having kids. It's just like it's kind of like a smoke and mirrors. Oh, why is there people dying in a famine? Oh, because there's too many kids. And also social demographics are shown as when you raise education levels of people, they have less kids. They have like 2 to 3 kids max. So you're trying to solve a problem by saying the problem is somewhere else, but I don't agree with that. And that's based on my research, and I would recommend you do your own research. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair. I think we need to wrap up. And thank you very much for coming, I know, and for staying also. It's very important topic. I really wish we have more time and also more more audience here as well. I would challenge everybody, including our panelists, what one step, and you don't have to answer it here, but think about it as the Ramadan is coming, as we're entering this blessed month. What one step you would take in terms of having an eco-friendly Ramadan this year? Only one step. And then let's stick to that for the rest of the year, inshallah. That's my only request, and that would be one of the key takeaways. If we can do only one step, that would be great. I really thank our esteemed panelists for taking their time, spending the evening with us, and I really hope we can have them back again and have a lot more engaging discussion. I would like to mention, last year we did create ICGC's first time a green initiative. One of the outcome of that green initiative was that we started with a community garden. We did some of the work there. Inshallah, this spring it would be up and running. If you are interested, please participate. It is for the community. We need a lot more engaged folks in this initiative, in these kind of activities, because that, inshallah, brings the